The good news is that this administration has a ready explanation for why prices are raging out of control. And no, it's not their own crappy monetary policy. No, it's not their own bad COVID regulations. No, it's not their lockdown ideas or the supply chain shortages that they have helped foment. It's none of those things. It turns out it's greed. Oh, you see, when the prices go up, it's greed. So when your meat costs more at the market, it's because the people who slaughter the cows suddenly got greedy. Like a year ago, they weren't greedy. They were real altruistic then when the prices were super low. Prices are just a reflection of greed. Okay, this particular view of economics is so benighted and bewilderingly stupid as to boggle the mind. Prices are not a reflection of people's greed. Greed is a constant in human nature. In fact, self-interest is a constant in human nature. And self-interest can only be served by providing a product at a price people are willing to pay. If it were just about greed, then meat producers could be charging $1 million a pound. Because after all, they're greedy for lots of money, right? But if the idea is that meat producers are randomly raising their prices out of greed, not reflecting underlying market conditions like labor shortages and supply chain bottlenecks, and the inflationary economy created by this administration, you're out of your mind. And greed alone cannot explain price increases because, again, it is a constant in human nature. But here's Jen Psaki trying to, again, the real reason meat prices are going up is because of this administration's garbage policies. But here's Jen Psaki saying that it's really because of greed. It's greed. It's greed.
The President, the Secretary of Agriculture have both spoken to what we've seen as the greed of meat conglomerates. That is an area where people go to the grocery store and they're trying to buy a pound of meat, 2 pounds of meat, 10 pounds of meat. The prices are higher. That is, in his view, and the view of our Secretary of Agriculture, because of, you could call it corporate greed, sure. You could call it jacking up prices during a pandemic.
It was greed. It's price gouging. Okay, now, even price gouging, the way the government usually defines it, is not price gouging. Usually price gouging means that a gas station is running out of gas, and so they have to price the gas so as to ensure that people still get gas. Okay, when you keep the price low, it artificially stimulates demand. That is what happens with price and supply curves. Okay, but again, the Democrats always have a ready explanation for why things are going bad, and it's because people are greedy. They did this with Obamacare too, right? You'd see companies that would increase their prices to compensate for the fact that they now had to pay for Obamacare. And then they would put that on their bills. And you remember the Obama administration and the media being like, how dare they? That just demonstrates how greedy they are. No, it demonstrates that when you artificially boost the prices of things, people have to boost the prices that they charge to the downline consumer. There's a weird pattern I've noticed that crops up when it comes to the understanding of price in the Democratic mindset. That weird coincidence is that every major industry that is private is bad, but every policy Democrats push is somehow altruistic and good. So, for example, it's not just meat consumers. I mean, it's not just meat producers. It is also the oil companies. Remember when oil spiked? Jen Psaki, this is just a couple of weeks ago, Jen Psaki suggested that the reason that the oil prices were spiking was not because of their crappy policy. It was because of the oil executives and their greed, too. It's always greed when it's people that the administration doesn't like.
The price at the pump usually moves alongside the price of refined gas. But recently, as you noted, there's been a split where the price of refined gas is going down, but prices at the pump are going up. That's exactly why the president sent the letter to the FTC last week, because that's not what we should see as the trend. There shouldn't be price gouging across the country. You shouldn't have oil CEOs bragging out there about the profits that they benefit from when prices are high at the gas pump.
Okay, so it's all about the greed of the oil executives. However, when it comes to labor and the price of labor, right, which is a commodity, labor is a commodity, and the wages are going up, which means that you're going to drive prices up as well. But when the price of labor goes up, that is not because of the greed of people who are attempting to get back in the labor market, of course. Then it's still the greed of employers. It's still the people who hire. It's because those stupid employers are so greedy that they won't hire people at wages that people don't actually want to take, and so the wages are going up. So, in other words, the people who demand a particular price for their goods and services are bad, except if they're good. Here's Jen Psaki explaining.
We know we've seen labor shortages in some industries. In some industries, that's because they need to have a more competitive package to offer to workers. It's a workers' market right now. We know that. People are looking for more dependable benefits. They're looking for wages that are higher. And that's something that is incumbent on a lot of industries to meet the moment on.
Okay, the reason this administration is failing on economics is because they have a perspective that is not in consonance with reality. It's heads I win, tails you lose. If the price of oil is too high, it's because the producers are really bad. If the price of labor is too high, it's because the laborers are really good and the employers are really bad. No matter what, the producers are really bad. Always. The companies and corporations are really bad. And the government's really good. They're really wonderful. And if we have to blow out the national debt in order to promote this idiotic idea, well, nobody's really worried about the national debt. Here was Jen Psaki saying that the national debt is just a lie. No one actually cares about the national debt. Here's the thing about the national debt. No one cares about the national debt until it bites them directly in the ass. The national debt is all fun and games until it turns out that servicing the national debt is eating up a substantial chunk of your budget every single year. And you have to use austerity measures like they've had to use in Europe in order to get your budget back into realignment because there ain't no one left to pay the bills and no one's buying the bonds anymore because there's no promise they will get paid back. But here's Jen Psaki pretending the national debt doesn't matter because, of course, she's a devotee, as this entire administration, of the idiotic modern monetary theory, which suggests you can just pump money into the economy at record rates and nothing will happen.
What do you say to people who say we're just going to be having the same conversation a little bit over a year from now?
I'm not sure what American person is saying that or is concerned about the debt limit, but maybe there's somebody you've met on the street. I don't know. But I will say that, our view, the president's view, is that this has been done in a bipartisan way. The American people shouldn't be worried about whether or not elected officials are doing what they should do and raising the debt limit to make sure we're covering bills that have already been incurred.
No, nobody's worried about the debt limit. Nobody's worried about the national debt. Okay, so they're not worried about inflation. And if they are, it's because they're dumb. And they're not worried about the national debt. And if they are, it's because they're dumb. In fact, it turns out that everybody who's unhappy with this administration is just wrong. How convenient if you're a Democrat. And then when you point this out to them, and well, January 6th. Well, January 6th. Meanwhile, by the way, in all the major cities that are governed by blue government members, the economy is stagnating. New York City job growth is completely falling apart. Matthew Hogg and Patrick McGeehan reporting for the New York Times. Since the start of the year, nearly 6 million jobs have been added in the United States. The unemployment rate has plummeted to 4.2%, close to where it stood before the pandemic. But in New York City, the economy appears to be in a rut. After getting 350,000 jobs in the last months of 2020, employment has slowed considerably this year, with just 187,000 jobs added since March. The city's unemployment rate is 9.4%. 9.4%. That's more than double the national average. Its decline in recent months was largely caused by people dropping out of the labor force. As the city plunged into its worst financial crisis since the Great Depression, the unemployment rate skyrocketed. In June 2020, it was 20%. Now it's down to about 10%. But New York has added back a little more than half the jobs it lost, according to the state labor department, far less than the rest of the country. The protracted pandemic has shut out tourists, scared off the crush of suburbanites who filled office towers every weekday. Just 8% of office workers were back at work 5 days a week in early November. Okay, so they're wrecking their own economy. And then the idea is that, you're supposed to ignore that because Donald Trump's a bad man who does bad things, who's bad? Same thing is happening in Illinois, by the way. According to the Wall Street Journal, Illinois is losing young people while Florida is gaining them. There's a shock. State Development Specialist Zach Kennedy notes the U.S. population actually grew in the prime working age, young adult age cohorts, 25 to 29, 30 to 34, 35 to 39. Illinois was among the few states to see a decline in those age cohorts. One reason is many students who leave the state for college don't come back. Only New Jersey lost more college-aged individuals out of state who never returned. One of the reasons for that is because Illinois has huge taxes. Illinois and New Jersey have some of the highest residential property tax rates in the nation. The state is losing children. Its under 18 population has declined by 350,000 over the last decade. Lousy schools are driving away young families. Each Illinois household is on average on the hook for $110,000 in government worker retirement debt. $110,000 for each Illinois household in terms of state debt burden. This is what happens when you run a state like garbage. So the good news is that, again, it's all misdirection. You notice that it's all misdirection. Right? When they fail, it's about January 6th, or in California, it's about making California an abortion sanctuary state to deflect attention from the fact that the governance there is absolutely terrible, or that they're doing a full-on mask mandate indoors again in California based on Omicron. In New York, they're attempting to misdirect by suggesting that they go after lawmakers. After gun makers. New York Attorney General Letitia James, she was on The View, explaining that New York State was going to lead the nation in going after gun makers. Yeah, that's going to fix your economy, Letitia. Sounds great.
Gun manufacturers and gun distributors in this country are immunized. No liability whatsoever. They're the only industry that is protected in this country. And given the carnage, and given the fact that this is the 9th anniversary of Sandy Hook, I am sick and tired of prayers and individuals whose hearts go out to all of those who have lost lives. We can do something about it. And what we need to do is hold these gun manufacturers and these gun distributors liable.
Okay, but all of that is just a distraction. And then you can woo that up as much as you want, view audience, but Democrats are losing because they are disconnected from the everyday reality of most Americans. How's this for a title? Ben Shapiro Show subscriber destroys like button with clicks and logic. I'd watch that. Make it happen, gang.